Hello, everyone. I'm Joanna McMahon, and I am one of the community education specialists for the celiac disease program at Children's National. And I'm here today to talk with you about safe gluten-free dining in restaurants. So let's get going. So I wanted to first talk and give you a little bit of an overview of gluten-free dining at restaurants, and then I'm going to talk with you about how you can prepare in advance to safely dine. A lot of it is just sort of taking some steps of doing some advanced research, possibly making some calls, just basically getting yourself oriented as much as you can with the menu and restaurant before actually even going there. I also want to talk with you about understanding some of the differences of gluten-free menus at restaurants and how to kind of ask questions about ingredient sourcing, because there is a big difference about things that restaurants can prepare in-house versus things they might bring in from outside. I also want to go over specific questions to ask so you can get a good understanding of the restaurant's knowledge and ease in preparation of gluten-free things. And then some of the common pitfalls and mistakes that we can make while dining in restaurants gluten-free. And then most importantly, some of our celiac disease program resources and additional help that we can provide as well. So some of the tips for preparing to dine at restaurants. So I had mentioned one of the biggest things that you're just going to learn, unfortunately, about living with celiac disease is that the best thing you can do for yourself in any situation is do your research beforehand and prepare ahead of time. Preparation is key. Think like a Girl Scout all the time. Be prepared. So some of the things you can do for that is calling ahead to make sure the restaurant will accommodate a gluten-free meal request. I know we live in the society time of texting and phone and internet research, and we rarely pick up the phone anymore. But in a situation like this, it really is necessary. Being able to speak to the manager or chef can make a humongous difference. First thing is you're going to just get a feel right from the conversation on the knowledge base that they actually have. Are they offering a gluten-free menu just to kind of be on the gluten-free bandwagon and be trendy? Or do they actually know how to safely prepare a meal for someone with celiac disease? Are they knowledgeable about cross-contamination? Do they understand some of the intricacies of gluten-free ingredients and where gluten might be hiding in a meal? Or are they simply just saying, yeah, we offer gluten-free pasta? Like, see how they feel in that conversation with you if you get a good feeling. Now, if you don't, you then know that that could be a restaurant you most probably want to steer clear of. As I said, speaking to the manager or chef, it's okay to ask and speak personally to the chef, whether you're in person or if you are doing this over the phone. They're the person that's actually going to be preparing your meal. And remember, this is a service industry. They are there to hopefully serve you because any good review that you can offer them is going to bring more people into their restaurant. So if you're able to walk away saying that you had a safe gluten-free meal there, they know you're going to be more likely to recommend it being a restaurant that other celiac people attend as well. So it is in their best interest to get on the phone with you if you make that request and they're available. And also you want to be prepared to educate. In general, part of being in the celiac community you're going to find is that you are essentially an educator and an ambassador when it comes to gluten-free things. So it's okay for you to speak up and potentially even teach someone at a restaurant how to prepare something safely. So many restaurants, unfortunately, are unfamiliar with preparing gluten-free foods. So if they think they are doing the right thing, you want to speak up and correct them so they know that there are things they can do better to make sure they are safely preparing a meal for people, so that they do know that they need to make sure they're avoiding cross-contamination. So if you do have a bad experience, it's vitally important that you call them and let them know that you had that bad experience so that they don't continue to repeat those same mistakes for other diners that are there dining with celiac disease. The other thing too is you want to have a plan for ordering. Look at the menu ahead of time. Target a couple items that you think hopefully you're going to be able to safely order. And then you want to make sure you either call ahead and ask some of those questions beforehand, or at least that you're aware of the questions you're going to ask when you do meet with your server at the table when you are ordering. So it always helps to have a plan before you even get there. And again, don't be afraid to ask questions. The most important thing you need to remember is that you're the one that's going to be suffering whatever consequences occur. So don't feel embarrassed or feel bad about taking up the server's time or the manager or the chef's time. There again, remember, it's the service industry. So you are you want to be asking all of the questions that you possibly can to make sure you feel comfortable eating this meal that's going to be served to you. And then say thank you. You always have to remember that a little politeness goes a long way. They want to know that you're appreciative. They're more likely to be accommodating when they know you're appreciative. So yeah, just make sure that you're kind of greeting them with a smile and letting them know that you are very grateful for the time and attentiveness that they're showing you. So understanding gluten-free menus at restaurants. One of the biggest things you need to know is that there is no regulation of any gluten-free menus at a restaurant. The FDA guidelines in 20 parts per million only qualifies for items that are prepackaged on shelves in grocery stores. So nothing in a restaurant goes through those same certification standards. Anybody who wants to can throw together what they consider a gluten-free menu and call it so. So that's why it is so vitally important that you are taking the time to ask these questions, to ask about preparation techniques, to ask about the intricacies of ingredients and what's actually in these meals, the marinades, etc., the fillers. So that's why you really do have to kind of sort of dine at your own risk in some extent. And so keeping that in mind, that's why it is so important for you to read reviews, to call, to speak with people, and find out about some of the safe places that you feel comfortable going. So when you're talking about ingredient sources, what are some questions to ask? Well, one of the biggest things, as I said before, is do they prepare their gluten-free items in-house, or do they bring them in from the outside? How is this so different, and why is it so important? So the biggest thing is when something is prepared from outside of the restaurant and coming prepackaged, you know that it potentially reaches those FDA regulations if it's prepackaged and possibly coming from an actual restaurant warehouse or sourcing site. So if it's labeled gluten-free certified and it comes prepackaged, you know it most likely is meeting those 20 parts per million standards. So for instance, say this picture here of the item at Starbucks, the Marshmallow Dream Bar, they're bringing that in from corporate, and they have that prepackaged. So you know it's safe to eat. Some of these other things though, so for instance, the picture in the middle on this slide, this is at a restaurant, or a bakery I should say, called Killer ESP down in Old Town Alexandria. It's a fantastic one, by the way. They have all kinds of different specialty coffee, sherbets, ice cream, all kinds of great stuff. But most importantly for us celiac and gluten-free people is you'll see they have a dedicated section here for gluten-free items. And the sign that even is with it says it's from the Happy Tart Bakery, which those of you that live in Northern Virginia might know is a dedicated gluten-free bakery. Everything they make at this bakery is gluten-free. So you know it's prepared safely in a dedicated facility that is not going to come into any cross-contamination with other gluten-containing items. And I love that this other bakery in Old Town, Killer ESP, brings in their items from Happy Tart. I feel comfortable then ordering them because I know that they took it seriously enough to bring in items from a dedicated facility. They're storing them separately. I have asked them questions, and make sure you do as well when you go in, still for your own peace of mind. But I know that they take it seriously and they keep things separate, and they're doing everything they can to ensure a safe, dedicated gluten-free meal for me when I order from them. So those are the type of places, and why it's important when you see something coming in from the outside that you know they do at least understand what it really takes to serve gluten-free items. Same thing with this item here over from Sweet 27. packaged, again, coming in from a dedicated gluten-free bakery at another restaurant. So when you see items that are coming from sources you can know and trust, that goes a long way in feeling that comfort to order them. Otherwise, when you just see gluten-free items that are sitting out and you don't really know that much about them, it's harder to necessarily get that handle on whether they're safe and if they came into any cross-contamination sort of scenarios. So for instance, here, the difference would be seeing this gluten-free bread just out on the table. Well, if they purchase this gluten-free bread from a supplier, you know that it's going to meet the 20 parts per million threshold. Whereas if they baked the bread, only the raw ingredients would. And the difference also would be if they baked it in their own kitchen, what else did it come into cross contact with? Was their flour being kind of thrown around? Was it made on the same countertop as the rest of their gluten-containing breads? How do you know what potential other risks they took while they were preparing it? The other thing too is even if it did come in from another supplier, with it being served on the plate like this, you don't unfortunately even know what it came into cross contact with when it came out of the bag from the supplier. So unfortunately, you still don't even honestly know if it's safe to eat. And that's where a lot of those questions then come in, and perhaps maybe if they give you the best answer and you do feel comfortable with it, but it's really difficult to know. Whereas here, you'll see this is a picture from an item at Chick-fil-A. So it's less glamorous, but it is actually comforting when you see that Chick-fil-A provides their gluten-free buns still in the wrapper. You know it's free from cross-contamination. It came from a particular gluten-free supplier. It meets the 20 parts per million guidelines, and you know that it has not come into contact with anything else because it's still in the wrapper when it's served to you. So again, asking some of those cross-contamination questions for your own peace of mind. So you need to ask what precautions they do take when preparing and handling your gluten-free food. So are there gluten-free items prepared in a separate space? So again, I told you, seeing some of those items that come from outside sources when they're kept separate and isolated versus these that are just out in the open with those little signs saying they're gluten-free. Well, you see gluten-free cupcakes, you see gluten-free bread, these fantastic looking donuts, but this is where you have to ask, do they have a separate dedicated kitchen space that they use to prepare them? Do they put them on the same countertop as any of the other items? Do they cook them in the same oven with circulating flour? These are all the kind of questions that you need to ask to assess if they're actually safe to eat for celiac people versus just gluten intolerant people. And there is a big difference. So ordering gluten-free pasta at restaurants, it's all the rage. We see it all the time on restaurant menus, but how often is it actually safe for us to eat? So this might seem like a common sense question if they use fresh water to boil gluten-free pasta. However, sadly, it's not. So a lot of restaurants, when they are preparing pasta, for time constraints, they just keep a humongous big pot of boiling water going at all times. And then when an order comes in for pasta, they just take the individual serving and dip it into the water and cook it, and then it gets sent out to the plate on the table. Well, obviously, if it's a gluten-free order and they do that, though, they're going to completely contaminate that entire meal. And sadly, a lot of these restaurants don't necessarily understand and know that. They think that just by serving you the raw gluten-free pasta, or not the raw, it's obviously cooked, but the raw ingredients of pasta, that's all that needs to be done. So that is where that potential education comes in. And also making sure that you know that you're not eating that without that question having been asked and known. The other thing that you need to ask is if they reuse any pasta water in any of their sauces. Some of the really old school Italian restaurants do this especially for some of their creamier based sauces. The starch from the pasta adds that filler or that creaminess texture to it rather than just cream or milk. So if you're getting something like a pasta Alfredo or any of those other cream-based ones, you want to make sure you're asking if they have reused any of the pasta water in the base of the sauce, so you know if it's actually gluten-free or not. So gluten-free pizza, can you order it? Is it safe? So again, this is where it can be important to know if they're preparing it on site or if it's brought in frozen from elsewhere. That at least can also help you kind of assess some of the base of how much of exposure it might have had. If it's coming in frozen, you know that at least there was no flour contamination while it was being prepared. However, cooking it is also potentially an issue. A big pizza oven is, they cook the pizza in that pizza oven by it being circulating air. So if it's being put into the same oven as all of the other regular pizzas, that flour is most definitely circulating and going to land on your gluten-free pizza. So what potentially can be done is some places offer these gluten-free pizza bags, you'll see in the picture below, where they actually make sure that the gluten-free pizza is in this bag and that no other flour can settle on it because it's protected by the bag when it's in the oven. If they don't have the bag, you can potentially ask them or educate them to see if they'll tent it with aluminum foil for you. That way, at least, again, they can make sure that no flour is settling on your pizza as it's being cooked and prepared. And then you know at least that there's less chance of any gluten contamination occurring. So ordering items from the grill, there's a few questions you need to ask here. So a lot of times we think we're doing the right thing by just ordering a burger without a bun. However, there are many restaurants, if they're making burgers from scratch, that use breadcrumbs as a filler for their burgers. So you need to ask them the source of their burgers, if they're making them in-house, if they're bringing them in elsewhere, if there's any breadcrumbs being used as the filler. Same with the hot dogs. I doubt as much that they're necessarily making them in-house from scratch, but different brands obviously are gluten-free versus not. So you'll see even like, the Simple Nathan's here, we know that's a gluten-free brand, but you need to ask again where the hot dogs are coming from, where these burgers are coming from, if they're coming from outsourced, and if they're dedicated gluten-free or not. The other thing important to know too is if they're using a separate spot on the grill when they're preparing these items. A lot, you'll see in the picture below, this is the way a lot of them use the grill in restaurants. They put the burger buns all on one side and then, the burgers, meats, and everything else on the other side. You obviously don't want your gluten-free item being put on the same space where a bun potentially was earlier. So you want to make sure that they're using a separate space on the grill as well. So again, there's no potential chance of cross-contamination occurring. The other important thing to know about ordering items from the grill is marinades or dressings or sauces. So for instance, steak is typically a naturally gluten-free item, the steak itself or the chicken breast itself. But if it's cooked on the surface, as we just covered, you want to make sure that's not occurring. Otherwise, that ruins that perfectly good, naturally gluten-free piece of steak or chicken. But the other thing would be if they're using a gluten-containing marinade. That obviously is a question that would completely change if it's gluten-free status or not. So again, making sure you're asking the ingredients of the actual sauces, dressings, or marinades that are being used on some of these items you would consider naturally gluten-free. So ordering items from a fryer, this is always so controversial. There are places that do have dedicated gluten-free fryers, and this is a vital, vital, important question to ask. Just ordering fries on their own without asking this question could make you very, very sick because they'll take the fries and they'll put them in the same fryer they're using for all of the chicken nuggets, onion rings, everything else that is covered in gluten-containing flour. So you want to make sure they have a dedicated gluten-free fryer that just the fries themselves are going in. The other important question to ask is it up and running today? And I say this, and make sure you ask it every single time, because it makes such a difference. You let your guard down, you start to think that it's always safe. And I say this from experience. So you'll see some of the pictures below of places that usually have dedicated fryers. Chick-fil-A, Five Guys, Elevation Burger, In-N-Out Burger. These are all places that have excellent reputations for being accommodating and gluten-free friendly. And they usually always have a dedicated gluten-free fryer. And because of this, I go to Chick-fil-A with my kids all the time. We usually always have fantastic meals there, never get sick. I consider it my safe space. So I let my guard down one day. I was in a rush. I just put my order in. I know that I've never gotten sick before, and I did not ask if the dedicated gluten-free fryer was up and running that day. Things happen. Fryers break down. And obviously, they're not going to be able to just do without a fryer for a day. So they'll throw things in to make sure they're getting their orders out. And unfortunately, that gluten-free fryer can get contaminated. I didn't ask. The fryer must have been down. I had those fries. I was sick for the entire weekend. So that's why I say you need to make sure you're asking every time, unfortunately, if the gluten-free fryer is up and running and working correctly. And that would be one of those common pitfalls I mentioned. But anyway, now we're going into fast, fresh restaurants. And these are becoming very popular. And they're great alternatives. It's healthy, nice alternatives to typical fast food. And I love a lot of these places because they do offer fantastic gluten-free options for dining. But you do need to follow some simple procedures to ensure safety every time. So Cava, Chipotle, Chopped, you want to make sure you're asking them to change into a fresh pair of gloves. And the reason this is so important is because as they're handling the items on a line, they obviously are also handling things that do contain gluten. At Cava, they're handling that pita bread. Chipotle, they are making those burritos and rolling them, which has the flour tortilla. So before they do make that, gluten-free bowl that does not have those gluten-containing ingredients, you want to make sure they change into a fresh pair of gloves so they don't have any of those crumbs still potentially on them before they start handling your order. You also want to ask if they have any fresh ingredients from the back. Again, think about it. Dipping hands in from right after you're handling a burrito. Using a bowl of a spoon that was potentially still just putting sauce or hummus onto that pita beforehand. So, and then getting dipped back into the bowl of ingredients. So by asking them to take out a fresh bowl of ingredients from the back, there hasn't not been any dipping handling beforehand. And they will do this, by the way. They are used to being asked to do this, and they're usually very accommodating in doing it. For a place like Noodles & Company that does surprisingly offer a lot of gluten-free items. They have gluten-free pasta. They have all of the rice noodles for the pad thai and Asian dishes, and they will use gluten-free soy sauce if you ask them. They will flag it as a gluten-free or an allergy order. But again, you need to make sure they know that when you are putting in your order at the register. And you also want to double check that they're using a fresh cooking pan. Normally when the allergy label comes up, they will do that immediately and double check themselves, I've usually found. But again, you never want to rely just on them. You want to make sure you're asking it yourself. And you obviously want to also double check the ingredients on any of the sauces or dressings that they are using on top of your item. So the biggest takeaway from all of this is you never want to assume. Just because something should be gluten-free doesn't mean it necessarily always is. You want to ask about ingredients even when it seems unlikely. If the ingredients are not available, it's always safer to err on the side of caution. My motto after a long time, and unfortunately learning sometimes the hard way, is when in doubt, go without. If you're just not getting a good feeling, that you just don't feel the server really knows what you're talking about, they're asking those questions that kind of make you sadly want to roll your eyes. If does egg contain gluten? Does milk contain gluten? They're obviously really not getting it. it's okay to then, it's annoying, but it is okay to then get up and walk out. Again, remember, you're the one that's going to be suffering the consequences, not them. Don't worry about being misconstrued as rude when you're worrying about your own safety. You just want to make sure that you're paying for this meal. You're there to get served. You want to make sure that it's going to be a good experience for you. And also, as I said before, ask every time. It's annoying, but it is where safety is construed. Just because something has been safe in the past doesn't mean it still is. Restaurants change suppliers, ingredients do change, chefs changed, and the dedicated fryer could break down. So just kind of get into the habit and routine of going through your list of questions before ordering. Hopefully you also will go to a lot of the similar restaurants or same restaurants over and over again, because that is kind of a way that you do sort of make it easier on yourself. As you know, places that you go, you have good experiences, they are gluten-free accommodating. Sometimes they'll even get to know you and see you and be able to answer your questions right off the bat. Because yeah, for instance, there are definitely servers at some of these places that tell me immediately, oh yeah, you're the gluten-free one, I know that. Yes, everything is working today, all is good. So yeah, you kind of at least build that community for yourself as well, which makes life substantially easier. As I said, relying on this community and looking for support. The other thing too is you're going to find other celiac people as well in this community. Look for reviews on Find Me Gluten-Free from other celiac sufferers. And I say that and specify that because it is really important. There's a very big difference between someone that is eating gluten-free by choice or someone that is just gluten-free intolerant versus someone that actually has celiac disease, as we all know. So there are many times on Find Me Gluten-Free or some of those apps and review sites where they actually say, if you have celiac disease, steer clear. Whereas, or yes, this is a safe place for people with celiac disease to dine. They really take it seriously. They really understand. Also finding local gluten-free bloggers. There's tons of them out there. There's DC bloggers, Northern Virginia bloggers, Maryland bloggers, and they do kind of go out there living with it every day as well, and they will tell you some of the favorite haunts and places they find that they go to regularly. Also attend events with us at the Celiac Disease Program. You'll have an opportunity to make new friends, to meet other children that have celiac disease as well. We also have the parent support group where you can speak with other parents who are living with it every day, getting to know what they're doing and places they're going and recommendations they have on safe restaurants they have found to dine. Also come to the DC Gluten-Free Expo we have every year. You'll see, even I have it listed, we have the date's already out there, Sunday, October 6th, 2019, so put it on your calendar. It's a great place to find all of the different local gluten-free bakers and restaurants that are here in the area that you know are dedicated, safe, gluten-free spaces that you can dine out and have a wonderful meal. We also have our Celiac Disease and Gluten-Free Digital Resource Center. We have our app, download it. We have all of our safe and unsafe ingredient lists, gluten-free shopping tips. We also have a dedicated list of gluten-free restaurants we recommend in the area. And that's another important thing to know too. All three of us of the education team with the Celiac Disease Program have celiac disease ourselves. We do live in the area too, and we have plenty of places that we can recommend you going to. And just in general, feel free to reach out to us at any time with any kind of questions that you might have. Here are two of our email addresses right here, Vanessa, who is the director of the program, and myself, Joanna McMahon. Email us with any questions you have, or if you want to ask about a restaurant in the area and see if we know of it, or have a place that we'd recommend. Please, that's what we're here for. We're happy to help. So I hope that this definitely made the idea of eating out seem less overwhelming or intimidating. And I hope to see you in the clinic soon or at some of our events soon. Thank you for joining me today.